Welcome, Tyra Johnson, to the show.
Hi,
Thank
how's
you
it
so much
going?
for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. And, I'm a fan of your work. I just think it's so cool. And I was reading about, all the different aspects of your work. And it seems like, you have a focus in sculpture,
Mhm.
but actually you're multidisciplinary. So there's
Yeah,
across the board, it sounds like you do a lot of different kinds of things.
yes, I became obsessed with, like, the best way to tell a story.
Mm.
And I have a really tactile visual practice with sculpture, and I really enjoy, like, kind of the mind-body connection to having something that requires your whole body. I started my career with painting, and was always sculpting in the background because it's just harder to figure out how to have a life with sculpture, like, in full transparency. So,
Uh-huh.
I was working on this and working on this, and I went on a trip with one of my best friends to Mexico, and we were in Taos, and I just remember, like, looking at the houses. I had been there before, and my entire medium is based off of cob and adobe and, like, urban building materials, and I remember just looking at them and being like, "This is what I wanna do, like, it's just time to make the leap," and I came back and asked a mentor, and she was like, "Respectfully, I don't know why you're painting, like, this is better and you can have a career doing this,
Mm.
like, you just need to put it out there and see what happens," and that day I, like, deleted all my painting off the internet, like, Matthew Wong, like, just ghosted my whole life and put up sculpture, and that was just kind of the end, and I was just like, "I don't wanna take any more commissions for painting." I was like, I had student loans, I was painting people's I was doing whatever
Uh-huh.
because I could, and I was like, it's not sustainable, it's not fulfilling."
Mm.
And I have a really spiritual approach to my practice, so I was like, I can't keep making things for other people, if I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So,
I love that you're multidisciplinary. And I was reading on your website and, your kind of your bio, and it talks about like how people try to pigeonhole you or try to get you
yeah,
like, you need to stay in this lane or you need to stay in that lane or you need to focus in this one thing and only do
yeah,
that. But I think multiple disciplines really kind of teaches you a broader perspective of art. It gives you a much wider philosophy of how
mhm,
to approach things.
yeah.
So it's cool that you both do sculpture, painting, also filmmaking, I understand.
Yeah, so I when I started branching more into installation and sculpture, and I was a theater kid, so this is where, like, a lot of this comes from, is, like, I've just always been interested in where all these mediums can come together to, like, transport people. I think when you look at exhibitions or experiences that people remember and are really, like, force you to turn your brain off and force you to confront something about yourself, you are stimulating a bunch of different senses because it becomes really hard. I actually went to school for science, ironically. It becomes really hard for the brain to process anything else when you have this sensory overload.
Mm.
But if you can, like, engage all of those senses in a complementary way that doesn't feel like overload, you can kind of quietly make people forget that they're thinking about anything else. And I think that's, like, the trick of installation and the trick of an interdisciplinary experience is that when you come in a place and it smells a certain way and the lights are a certain way and there's haze or there's music and there's all these things like guiding you
Mhm.
to have a certain experience, but you're not even really perceiving that. Um, you just walk in and you're like, oh, what's going on in here? And like just that quickly, you're no longer thinking about
Yeah.
anything else. So I became really obsessed with like, okay, well, if I can consistently create spaces like that for people, then like what do we get to do inside those places? Like when I realized that that was the interaction people were having with my work, I personally feel if I'm gonna have people's time and their presence and like a portion of their life, even if it's for an hour,
Mhm.
that like I have a responsibility to have them learn something about themselves or have their life, like, improve or change or even just, like, a question of, like, "Oh, do I wanna be doing this?" Like, there was a lady that I met at a show, and we were talking about this piece, and it's called, "Keep It Together," and it's about kind of, like, femininity and this challenge people have as they take on partners and families and children to, like, keep their dreams and their individuality center focus, and she started crying, and then, like, the next day, she reached out to me, and she was like, "I got divorced last year, and, like, I wanna quit my job, and, like, something about, like, talking today just reminded me that I just, like, need to go after this thing that I wanna do." And then she moved to another country and, like, did that, and it was that day, I was like 2017, I was like, "Oh shit, like what you do can make people change their actual lives."
Mhm.
And it's like a thing that people don't talk about, and the people are shy and they don't like to chit chat. So like you never know when you're having that impact on someone. So I tried to like root into that and kind of led me down a different path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, there's a lot to unpack in what
Sorry.
you said, and I love that because I think it's one of the unique things about your work is that there is such a philosophical aspect to it,
Mhm.
and it deals in so much of how we view ourselves, how we view the world, the structure of society in general,
Mhm.
and self-reflection,
Yeah.
you know? And I would almost argue, like, self-reflection is just such a great quality,
Mhm.
and sometimes, or at least in today's day and age, I feel like there's a lack of it, or it seems sometimes like it feels like there's a lack of it.
Y-
So to hear that you have, that experience where you created something that caused someone to do that, that
Yeah.
allowed them to go into themselves,
Yeah.
I think that's such an interesting approach to creation and art.
Yeah. I think for a long time, I really tried to keep spirituality or things that pushed a specific narrative in terms of like my career or getting paid or whatever the case may be, because it became, oh, if you talk about how this is based on chakra energy, like the conservative people that want to commission you for this thing aren't going to want to work with you anymore. And at the same time, I was like, "But that is where it comes from." So whether I'm saying that or not doesn't change, like, the intent of the work. So, as time has gone on and, like, as I've proved, I think, competence,
Mhm.
I'm a lot less concerned about just saying what I wanna say with my work, and I
Sure.
think people do or don't make that compromise sometimes, but, like, I was like, "I just don't think I'm gonna make it anymore.
Yeah.
Life is short, like" the world's gonna burn. Might as well be doing what I wanna do,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, do what you love.
Yeah.
And when it comes to art or in the creative process, so if you actually went to school for science, at what point
Yeah.
did the arts enter your life? Was it like, were you creative when you
Oh,
were young?
very young, and even I went to a fine arts or a liberal arts school. I went to TCU, and, I had the pleasure of being exposed to a lot of different education, and I took a ton of philosophy and a ton of traditional arts education,
Mhm.
but I was there on a science scholarship, so if I changed my major, I wasn't gonna get to be there anymore. So then I just became the kid that, like, I took 18 hours every semester and was taking summer school because I was like, "I'm just gonna pack everything I can into this and figure it out later."
Mhm.
And it's funny, I was, like, selling people furniture in undergrad and, like, making shit for people's dorms and, like, decorations and things,
Yeah.
painting, and because, like, that's the skill I had, and I was a theater kid, and I was, like, in like, audition choirs, like, the whole 9 all through my entire childhood, and I never really drifted from that. It just started to take on a different form, and I think the challenge to being interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary in any I think everybody would agree with is that at some point you have to pick something to focus on.
Mhm.
Because when you are casting your net all the time, you will go nowhere very slowly.
Yeah.
It's not even nowhere fast. It's like a painful slow drift.
Yeah.
And there has to be something that like you feel the most called towards. And for me, that has always been sculpture and installation, only kind of second to like architecture and design, which is where the placemaking and space design I think comes from.
So it's been with you for basically your whole life.
Yeah.
Do do you remember this being in your family at all? Like, were your parents creative people? Were you surrounded by it?
Yeah. Yes, my parents were creative, but not necessarily for their vocation. Like they both came from, poverty and not like families that didn't have a lot.
Mhm.
So they were focused on like being able to provide a family.
Mm.
But my mom danced growing up, and like because they had the focus that they had and like taking care of us and giving us a different experience, we had oil paintings in our house. They were, like, commissioning portraits of us when we were kids, because I was a military kid, and we lived in Germany, and talking about access to art, we left the States, like, lower middle class. My dad was, like, a young airman in the Air Force.
Mhm.
Then got to Europe where there's trains and public transportation, and now your money is worth more, and that gave us a lot of opportunities, and there was a lot of access to art because, like, things weren't behind this paywall that we have here,
Mm.
on everything.
Yeah.
There is, like, a classism to culture in America that just point blank, it always has been that way.
Mhm.
So, it was interesting to get so much of my childhood in a place where that wasn't the case.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting that you have the experience of growing up, kinda globally, not a lot of kids. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe a lot of military kids, if they're transferring around different bases and stuff, would get that experience, but not a lot of people get to experience that at a young age.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool that you got that perspective early. You mentioned, like, flat, or 2D, right? Like drawing, painting, these kinds of things.
Mhm.
When you think about the difference between 2D and 3D, something that is, like, has dimension,
Mhm.
jumps off the wall, like the kind of work that you do,
Mhm.
something that can live in a space or even
Stand
take up a
alone.
space.
Yeah.
I guess tell me about what draws you to the quality of dimensionality, the tangible, the tactile?
Yeah, I don't know if I know. I don't know if it's like a calling, like, it's just always felt that way, and even in school, like, I would always do really well in the sciences that were spatial, like chemistry and physics. I think, like, I dance, and I've always just been the bodily kinesthetic person, like, I've
Mm.
played sports, and I think sitting in a chair like this was, like, so unfulfilling. I was I just, like I mean, I just was like, I'm bored of sitting here. I wanna stand up, I wanna move, I wanna, like, be using my body. I never wanted to be in, an occupation where I was sedentary. Like, it
Mm.
just I was like, "I'll lose my mind."
Yeah.
Like, just that I don't think that's the way humans were meant to be, just full stop. I think that a lot of things have happened over thousands of years that have led us to where we're at, but, like, that's just not what we were. Um,
Yeah.
and it's really interesting, like, the amount of evidence there is for some of the health issues we encounter just because we're so much more sedentary now, and, um, I'm like, I didn't know that at the time. I just was like, "This my back hurts when I sit all day, and it doesn't when I don't."
Mhm.
Like,
Right.
just very cut and dry.
Yeah. Clear
Um,
evidence, just like that.
yeah, I was like, "I don't need a study to tell me, like, what I'm feeling
Yeah.
right now." So
It's interesting that you felt drawn that way, and of course, your mom being a dancer as well, right? So
mhm.
expressing through movement,
Yeah.
which I think is so interesting, and of course comes through in many different art media. When it comes to the philosophical aspects of the work that you make,
Mhm,
things like self-reflection,
mhm.
and you having studied, with that philosophy background, that scientific background,
Yeah.
the spatial relationship that not only we have, like, as humans
Mhm.
with space, but also that we share the space, right? Like, obviously, we share the earth
Yeah.
with each other, we share spaces together all the time.
Mhm.
When you think about the philosophy and the approach to your work, what shaped that?
A lot of that is, like, a spiritual connection to land, and I think I have always been, like, a student of divinity. I was raised really religious, and then as I got older, I landed somewhere that feels probably more agnostic, if you could give it a label, but in that, my parents had different backgrounds, faith-wise,
Mm.
and my dad's whole deal was, "You can raise them in the church until they get to high school, then they can do whatever they want." Like, let them explore, so I was in a house that would let me go to, like, synagogue and mosque and, like, mass and learn all these different ways of being because I was like, we're either all kind of on the same page or it's all nonsense, and that was my, like, kind of internal hypothesis, but I was like, I wanna spend time, like, understanding what people of the world believe and how different cultures were built upon different beliefs, and the second you get outside of recent relatively European history, you get indigenous cultures that have this deep tie to land in everything that they do. So as I looked into my own family history and like learning more, most of my family's from Florida, and I do have like Native American like ancestry, but I
Mhm.
didn't have the pleasure of meeting those people, and it's not that far removed. It's just grandparents on both sides that passed before I got to meet them.
Hmm.
And as I went and learned like what tribes that we belonged to, I was just like, there's this thing that I feel drawn to that feels so much more natural. And when you start kind of stripping away the names of all the faiths, a lot of the rituals and practices and beliefs just like are the same.
Mhm.
So when you look at the way I make my work, it actually came from like flying a lot as a kid and feeling like I saw figures or silhouettes in the land.
Hmm.
And I really wanted to look at, okay, we have maybe energies or even practices and tangible things that every culture throughout time has always done on a full moon, that every culture throughout time has always done at nighttime or whatever,
Hmm.
right? Like there's this thing that kind of feels like marriage everywhere. There's something that's being referenced and it's some belief system. So when you start looking at like the architecture of energy or the architecture of space on even like a really granular scale, there starts to be these really obvious ties to different feelings, experiences, and things that we go through. So that is how I'm looking at things,
Mhm.
from a philosophical perspective is like, how can I reference or channel or try to focus on a certain energy or a certain feeling, through the land and creating a space somewhere in between that.
So now you are full-time
Mhm.
artist,
Yeah.
and, you have your own, obviously, like, independent practice and all that
Mhm.
stuff, independent studio.
Yeah.
When it comes to art and commerce,
Mhm.
right? Because to be to be a full-time artist, obviously, people need to be commissioning and buying the art,
Mhm.
and you have representation, whether it's in galleries or, just out there in the world in multiple
Mhm.
places, multiple countries. However that's structured, what do you feel like is the good balance between art and commerce?
The ideal balance is none. Like, I feel like, there's that whole theory of, like, the second we start attaching dollar signs and accessibility to art, that it changes what it is, but that's not real life, like, it's 2026, things are expensive.
Yeah.
And for me, I just draw a really clean line. I am a bit neurotic. I do have quite a scheduling system for myself.
Yeah.
But it is now over the last year, I've really shifted into structuring my schedule based on my natural rhythms instead of trying to force working within, because I do a good a bit of public work and commissions, so I
Mhm.
do end up in this 9 to 5 space from like an availability meetings perspective, but I have studio blocks, like Mondays are studio days with like an hour long admin window. And that's just like check emails, do my outreach, whatever. And then Tuesday, I'm in the studio in the morning. And then the evening, it's marketing and like outreach. And Wednesdays, I have like a life block. And then I do something that's like professional development related, like go to a museum, watch a documentary, like fall down a wormhole researching whatever thing.
Mhm.
And then Thursday and Friday are a repeat of Monday and Tuesday. And at the end of the day, Friday, I, like, clean up the studio and get it set so that, like, coming in on Monday is there's not a hurdle, there's not, like, shit to clean up right away, like, I
Mm.
can just get in the flow of things,
Yeah.
and I think drawing those lines allows me to compartmentalize really easily. I had to shift my mindset from being productivity oriented to satisfaction,
Mm.
and that has been the most pleasant shift, sharing things less, like, being on less of a timeline,
Mhm.
um because it's just not sustainable. Like, I just burned out so aggressively hard.
I think that's a super healthy practice, especially
Yeah.
for creative people. So, I guess this is one of those moments we were talking about off camera earlier, where I would say those creatives out there in the world listening or watching, find a way to structure your
Seriously, stop winging it, you know? It doesn't matter what the system is, find a system and stick to it, and I evaluate every month, and
Mhm.
when I first started making this shift, I'd do it every week, and I would, like, journal on Sundays and be like, "Okay, what worked about last week?"
Was that always a part of you? Like, do you always feel like you had that capability to have the objective point of view of the world and yourself?
There's certain parts of yourself that take a long time to notice,
Mm.
and then other parts that are really obvious.
Mhm.
So I think there's things that I can only recognize about myself as I continue to get older because that's just the nature of life.
Mhm.
But I do think I had a lot of circumstances growing up that forced me to be objective.
Mm.
Like, my mom got sick when I was really young, and, like, I think that kind of put me many times in a position of, like, not I didn't realize it till I got older, but, like, not thinking about it, like, how a kid thinks, right? Like, kids aren't thinking, like, "Oh, like, when I get home, I need to help my mom, like, change a bandage after surgery," right? Like,
Yeah, sure.
I think that there was, like, a responsibility, and I also think that because when you experience loss or, like, near death or, like, chronic illness of, like, a loved one or a family member, there's this perspective that you have very early about what is important and
Mm.
what's not. So, like, as many challenges as came with that, like going to volleyball practice and then, like, going to sit in a hospital, like, everybody else went home and, like, hung out, people were going to movies, and I was kinda just like, "Oh, I just wanna hang out with my mom because, like, I also don't know if she's gonna be here that much longer." Like,
Right.
there were certain times where I was like and, like, blessing, she's still here today and, like, she's doing well, but
That's good.
that thing that happens is, like, I just didn't care about a lot of the things. Like, I was never in, like, drama, like, as a kid growing up and, like,
Mm.
groups. I was like, "I'm here to have fun. I'm here to see my friends because I'm gonna go and maybe be stressed or maybe, like, have these other things going on."
Yeah, so it maybe comes into you through experience when you're young. It's rare that young people would pay attention to that kind of stuff unless you
Yeah.
had a repeat experience of
Yeah.
perspective shifting things, and it sounds like the experience with your mom
Mm.
was another
Yeah.
part of that.
Yeah. I think you have to I've always been, like, an explorer, and I think a little bit of adrenaline junkie, like, I just wanna go, like, live all the life I can live because I think that's how you tell good stories, and I think that's how you make good art.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes I sound, like, really old. I'm like, I think one downside to the internet is that, like, a lot of people have stopped having those experiences genuinely,
Mm.
or the world has become so connected that people maybe don't have the same desire or drive to see something that they feel like, "I can kinda tell what the deal is because there's, like" I can do all the research and I can do all the things and see it from a distance.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it was cool to grow up in a time where you're like, "Yeah, I wonder what that place looks like," because I don't have the ability to go Google it, and, like, all I have to go to a library to find a book
Yep.
that has a picture of what this place looks like, and then I have to imagine the rest of it. There's no videos, there's no like, unless I'm watching a movie or TV, because that's, like, all we had. You had this longing, I think, in this for me at least, this thing that I felt like I needed to go experience, and I think it just got baked into me, and I think I get antsy now when I'm somewhere in the same place for too long, especially when you build something that anchors you to a place, and a community, which is beautiful, but at the same time, sometimes there's this internal angst where I'm like, "I wanna burn it all down and run away." But I'm like, "No, you just need to go on vacation."
Yeah.
Like, take a just go on a drive, like, go hike, like
Yeah.
and when I start to feel that way, like, usually it just means go be in nature somewhere, and then I kinda settle, and I'm fine.
Typical feeling for, uh, practicing artists, I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You just get to that place where, especially those of us who are, in commercial art, you just get to a place where, yeah, your productivity has been so heightened, so in demand, and eventually you get to that place where you're kind of, like, burning out a little bit, you're getting tired, you're getting frustrated. It is
And
that
then you're like,
exhaustion, and
"The momentum, but I can't slow down because then I'll have no money,
yeah,
and I need to eat." And then
yeah,
you're like, "Wait, no, that's trauma. You're
yeah,
not that broke anymore.
that's right.
Like, slow down, like, take a break."
You were kinda talking about when we were talking about art and commerce,
Mhm.
not focusing so much on the outcome and focusing more on just doing the work, practicing the art.
Mhm.
doing what's inside of you, putting it out into the world. When you think about those intangible qualities of your work that speak to people out there in the world, that speak to whether it's a corporate client, right, who wants to
Yeah.
outfit like a new space, or if it's just a person who came across your work,
Yeah.
wants to buy it in a gallery, what do you feel like the intangible qualities are in your work that speak to people?
It really is, I found to be, like, a land and, like, a spiritual thing, like, and it's funny because I kept like I said, I kept trying to reject that and, like, kinda trying to, like, soften it and, like, not make that the point,
Mhm.
and then I had the solo where I, like, made this universe, and this lady walked in, and she walked in, she, like, took this deep breath, and she was like, "Oh my god, I feel like I just walked into a temple," and I was like
Mm.
that's the intangible quality, like, it is the energy, like, it is the silhouette, and it is that it feels natural, and I think every time I talk to someone, they're like, "Oh my god, I wanna touch it," because, like, we're kids like, you're kids, you're a human, when you go to the beach, you wanna touch the sand, and I'm, like, putting sand in front of your face and making it look like this thing that you want to play with when you start talking about sculpture and 3D media, or as a presence that it has.
Essentially enveloping a space, right? Like giving someone an immersive experience
Mhm.
of how they view the work, how they experience the work. And you kind of mentioned earlier having also worked on short films and things like this. So you still practice in other ways. And the common theme I keep kind of seeing seems like narrative, right? Like story.
Yeah.
And the story, there are two stories in life.
Yeah.
There is the story you tell yourself, right? Like there's the
Mhm.
narrative that you live by, and this story you tell yourself about who you are.
Yeah.
And then there's the story that you experience in the world, which is just living your life. There's an expanse of time.
Mhm.
The narrative aspect of your work it is cool because it spans time in a way in which you're talking about, like, this indigenous inspiration, right? Like land
Mm.
art, our relationship with the land, with nature, the materials that come from that place
Yeah.
that we use to shape space, which I think is such an interesting aspect of
Mm.
your work. And so I guess I'll ask you, how do you view narrative, whether it's your personal narrative
Yeah.
in life or just the narrative of life and its involvement in your work?
Yeah, I think about story a lot, and I've always started with story. Like, usually I know the story I'm telling before I know what it looks like because I think that's how it has to be, and I think that if we were all stripped of our mediums and our toys and our gear, like, we would just have stories to tell each other.
Mhm.
Um, and you know very well, like, artists are storytellers, that is at our core what we're supposed to be doing, and I think one of the great, tragedies of what consumerism has done is made artists more focused on feeding themselves than telling the story,
Mm.
and that's not a negative thing, it's just the like, I want a roof over my head, right? It's just common sense.
Yes.
Um, so when I'm telling a story, I'm like, "Okay, this is the thing I wanna talk about, this is how I want it to feel," and then usually I'm like, "Okay, well, what shapes feel that way? And then what colors feel like that thing?" And then I'm just kind of building and constantly referencing the narrative throughout the entire piece or the project. And even like we shot it's actually a dance short that we shot at the end of December.
Mhm.
Um and that's from a body of work of mine called The High Priestess is Trapped. And it's a big placemaking proposal that has this kind of ritualistic succession of like 11 dancers, and it's referencing a period of grief that I went through over the past year. And the score came out of needing work that was, quicker and more responsive,
Yeah.
to kind of just channel some of the feelings that I was going through.
Mhm.
I was like, "I'm really sad. I don't have it in me to go stand up in a studio and lift a 50-pound bag of plaster, but, like, I can, like, sit here with, like, a MIDI and my computer and just kind of, like, kill time in the middle of the night." And I started the music and I had no idea where I was going. I didn't even know it was gonna be a project. There was no name, there was no nothing, and then on, like, day 3 of this kinda crazy experience, I was like, "I think I would make a score." Like, I don't know what this is about to be, but I think I wanna try to make music that sounds a certain way for how I'm feeling in this, like, moment, the song and, like, the short is called "The Priestess is Unwell," and it's, like, this point in the score and in the story where, like, I was falling apart, like,
Mhm.
we were holding it all together, and then I was like, "Oh, like, something's wrong, like, I'm not well," and you start to have these, like, cracks in the facade of, like, keeping your life together and keeping to move while you're going through this, like, intensely awful thing, and I became so much more comfortable in telling the story and making some of the creative decisions as I progressed through that process.
The tools of going through grief are so interesting when we're talking about, I mean, and when I say tools, I mean the expressive tools or the
Mhm,
artistic
yeah.
tools. And you doing this piece that is of movement and dance, as well as musical
Mm,
and, putting it on film, which is essentially documenting it to allow other people to experience the same thing.
yeah.
I think that's so interesting, um, because these are the almost, I would say, like, ancient tools of grief. Like, these are the tools of
Yeah.
grief that we've always used.
Yeah.
Even when you think from an indigenous perspective, like music, beating on things, shouting into the sky,
Mhm.
whatever that is, like, that's music, right?
Yeah.
That's where the origin comes from. So it's so interesting that in that moment, you were kind of called to these tools.
Yeah, and I think, like, we talked about narrative and, um, The High Priestess is Trapped, like, that entire project, the placemaking side of it, the sculpture part of it is like a giant bird cage built 360 set,
Hmm,
and when I was going through all of this, like, I have this, like, a figure that I reference when I, like, meditate, and it's like I call it, like, a priestess familiar, and it kinda feels like a cross between a butterfly and a bird,
mhm,
and at that point in time, like, I literally did feel like a bird in a cage, and I was just like, "I can't go forward, I can't go backward, like, this thing is happening in my life," and the whole, like, underlying point of that is the second part of this project is called The High Priestess Can Fly, and it was, like, recognizing that I had the key to, like, get out of the cage and,
mm,
like, that we have, like so when you mention these tools, like, as I went through this process, I realized that the process was the tool, and that I don't think I would have arrived at this place where had I not been working through it or making something through it, I don't know that I would have gotten to any kind of other side, if there even is an other side.
yeah,
Um, but I knew that I just, like, couldn't sit in despair all the time, and I was like, "You're gonna feel like shit, you are, but, like, keep making something because eventually you won't feel that way." That ended up being, like, the way forward was, I just find something, and I would just pick up a thing, and I just part of that also, I think, was, like, the indecision of it, and, like, some days when I did have bodily energy, but not, like, emotional energy, I did sculpt and I did work on, like, scale models of set designs, like, I did things that felt right for the story, and it was my way of, like, processing what was happening. It was a really interesting time because that was also, like, a very demanding time for me publicly and, like, in my career and, like, with a lot of the projects I was working on, and I was
mhm.
like,
Of course it timed out that way.
uh-huh, 'cause nothing good happened. Like, nothing happens, at the right time, and, I was like, "You have to find a way to keep showing up, like, you did not work for this many years
Mm,
to, like, let it all fall apart right now." 'Cause I think there are those moments in everybody's career, there's, like, these inflection points where you can tell something's changing for the long haul,
mhm.
like, you're going through this shift that you're not gonna be able to return from, and I was like, "No, these are this is, like, why I chased the career that I did." So it kept being this, like, internal battle of, like, how do you feel the feelings you need to feel? Because 'cause I'm not an idiot. I'm like, I know if I don't address this, it's just gonna be a problem
Yeah.
in the worst way for my health or my relationships or whatever.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you will never forgive yourself if, like, you let everything fall apart for something that you know is a human experience that is temporarily this painful and eventually, like, is a thing you can carry.
Mhm. I drill down on it because, it's a place that I'm in now,
Mhm.
in this moment. It's why we rescheduled this interview actually, because we lost someone important to us.
Yeah, I'm
And
sorry.
that that tool part, right, like, finding the expressive tools of processing it, I haven't gotten to that place yet.
Yeah.
Part of that is time, just
It takes
because
time.
we're a part of the it's not I mean, it's basically our dear friend's spouse who was also a dear friend of ours.
Yeah.
Um, kind of a person we spent
A lot of time with.
time with, like every major transition in life or
Yeah.
celebration, these are the people. And it's so interesting to like be in the middle of it. And right now I can see the tools that I need,
Mhm.
like I can see the tools that I will have access to in the coming days.
Yeah.
But finding that energy that you're talking about, like some days you wake up and you don't have the emotional energy, or some days you wake up and you don't have the physical
For
energy, or,
sure.
or whatever that is, and that wave that you're on
Mhm.
throughout the process, I think is kind of like a fascinating process to go through when you're an artist.
Mhm.
It's a terrible feeling, obviously, but at the same time, I think it's the beauty of being an artistic person, because that, like, with time, I'll come to a place where I can physically, like, manifest it, or audibly or visually, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it consistently made me confront my feelings because I was like, you can ignore this and maybe miss out on the most impactful work you could ever make. Or you can lean into it and deal with the discomfort, getting over the hump of like that internalized fear of something being bad,
Mhm,
like allowed me to like use the tools.
mhm.
Was what allowed me to do that. Like, I could have started sculpting, I could have started painting, I could have done a lot of things that
Right.
I'm adept at and, like, have spent a lot of time with, or I could do something that, like, by all intents and purposes, I should be bad at. Like like, the first time I decide to do a thing, like, it should probably not be that great, you know?
Mhm.
So I, like, just accepted that, like, you need an outlet that you have no responsibility to, like, you need something that, like, you can just get lost in,
Mhm.
and even if that means I'm not always in the outlet in an expressive way.
You have this objective point of view, you have such a strong self-reflective quality, the way that you view art, the way that you view the world, your sort of kind of philosophical approach to everything, it's just so sound, and I think a lot of people could gain something from that knowledge, gain something from your experience. So, what is the best advice that you feel like you have for other artists out there in the world who just wanna make the stuff they wanna make?
You know, I would say to anchor on the thing that you wanna make and the story that you wanna tell and detach from how it gets made.
Mm,
Like, if you are in a forest and you wanna get to the top of a mountain, there is a million different ways to get there. But, like, if you don't know that you're trying to get up a mountain, or you don't know what you're trying to make or what story you're trying to tell, you also can't objectively look at all the different ways to get there.
mm,
And I think that has always been my guiding I'm like, I know what my dream is. Like, I know that I wanna go build a big land art, like, compound where, like, artists can be and come and build it out of the earth, and, like, that's the thing that I wanna do. So I think, like, know where you're going and then look at people as your guides. You do have to have an obscene amount of belief in yourself to know that that dream is, like, worth continuing to find all these different paths. Because that's I think that's the difference between people we look at who are doing the thing they wanna do, regardless of the context and the way they're doing it,
mhm,
and the people who aren't. Like, I just somebody like, you have to believe it's worth doing,
mhm.
like, truly.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is
Great.
Yeah, this was great. This was a great conversation.
Yes. Cool, cool.
Our executive producers are myself and Jessica Kramer. Our producer is Giselle Saucedo. Our editor is Max Smith. Music by Creators. I'm your host, Roger Peters. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in.